While Trump's arraignment and arrest is certainly newsworthy to us in the U.S., I wanted to step back and return briefly to the protests, demonstrations, and strikes going on in France, which have not subsided. The French are quite right to vigorously oppose Macron's decree to raise the retirement age, and for many reasons. It should not be lost on us in the US and in the UK what is going on in the world around us.
And this is a meeting, small meeting, to contest the reform of Emmanuel Macron, the project of law of Emmanuel Macron about the age of retirement. So people are just going here to contest the politic of Emmanuel Macron.
Do you think the police are using reasonable force during these protests?
No, not at all. At this very moment, yes, but in the global protest that we had during the earlier days, I think not, because this is really violent. We have a lot of violence in France. The police is really harsh with people. They're beating people, they're using gas against people. So, no, it's really violent. And I send a message to people watching us abroad to support us, to help us, to say to Emmanuel Macron that this is not normal.
As ordinary people in the US, UK, and France, we are facing an all-out assault on our sovereignty and rights by conservatives. In France, the flashpoint is Macron's assault on retirement. In the US, the assault touches on every aspect of our lives. The conservatives intend to strip the old of retirement, adults of control of their body, their right to speak and vote, and the young of education with the intent of forcing them back into the workplace. And in the UK, conservatives are destroying the NHS and stripping the right of protest.
What's significant is the brutality and the fact that today there is 2 persons that were protesting in Sainte-Soline that are in coma because of police brutality.
And we are demanding the dissolution of some part of the police, which is really violent. They're called the Bravem in France. They are really violent. They're on motos, and they come and they just beat you, and that's it. Okay? So this shouldn't exist in a democratic country. This is not normal. People have the right to protest. They have the right to not agree with the French president. This is what a democracy is about. And so we will continue until Macron stops his law.
In the UK, our parliament is actually passing a law to make it illegal to protest or to strike. I mean, what would you say to the people of the UK? Should they be concerned about that?
Yeah, of course. The first word I want to say is support, a word of support. And I want to say to the British people, protest against this law. We are in a moment in Europe when the people are rising. They are raising their head, and they're saying no to that sort of thing.
We've been kicked off our committees as representatives elected by our constituents. Each of us represents 78,000 people, and our people are being silenced because they're kicking us off committees. They're threatening to take a vote to expel us today. Our member ID badges have been shut off. Our representative ID badges have been shut off. And this is not what democracy looks like. We are elected to serve our constituents. They shut our microphones off. They shut our voting machines off. We couldn't even talk about the issue. And so when we went to the well to force the issue, they called us insurrectionists and are now trying to expel us from the legislature.
On Monday evening, Nikki Fried, the newly elected leader of the Democratic Party of the state of Florida, along with Lauren Book, the leader of the Senate Democrats here in the Florida State House, they were both arrested for protesting a law that passed the Florida Senate on Monday.
We don't want, there is not any person in France who wants to work 2 more years. No one. It's like 93% of the people working don't want to work too much years. 2 more years, sorry.
Many commentators say, hang on, what's the big deal? He pushed up the age of retirement from 62 to 64. Well, that's not such a radical change. Well, maybe it doesn't sound very radical until you come across a startling statistic, demographic statistic. Did you know that a poor French worker, male French worker, lives on average 10 years fewer than a rich salary receiver living in Paris in one of the fancy arrondissements of the beautiful capital of France? 10 years difference. So essentially, when you're pushing up the pension age limit from 62 to 64, for a very large proportion of poorer workers, that means that they won't receive a pension for very much of their post-work life.
I'll remark here that the conditions in the U.S. are actually the worst of all three nations. UK is not in great condition either, but we're not doing very well, not anymore. And the upshot is that for many low-age working men in the U.S., they may pay into a system they will never, ever benefit from.
Either we win, either we lose. If we win, we can gain more, we can obtain more. And if we lose, this will be over, and we know that Emmanuel Macron will be harder and harder and harder with the French people. So this is a moment when we need to stop him, and we need to stop his violence also.
You see, these austerity measures, which are essentially a kind of class war against the poor, they come as a very long list. I remember when I was negotiating with the International Monetary Fund, with the European Central Bank, with the European Union, and they were imposing austerity measures upon my people here in Greece. That list began with some signature policy, like pension reform, they call it. And then once they managed to push through that, then a whole list of other, again, in inverted commas, reforms follows.
Reform, because a lot of people pretend that the young people are protesting and they don't really know about what they're protesting because they're not even concerned about the pension, you know, they didn't even start working and stuff. But what we see actually, because I work with a lot of young people, is that they're pretty well informed and they know what they're talking about.
So you have to understand that what the majority of the French public realize, is that it is the thin edge of the wedge. If they let this seemingly innocuous increase in the age limit go through, then a whole host of other policies are going to be implemented that will continue to redistribute income from those who are struggling to those who are very affluent.
The situation in the U.S. is much more advanced, and I would caution anyone in the UK or in France to see what a taste of the future will look like.
Senator Schultz is clearly proud of his work, but as our investigation will show you, he's just one part of a shadowy national effort funded by big corporations and PACs to roll back child labor laws that have been in place since the 1930s.
More states are considering changes to child labor laws as they try to fill jobs. Maine and Michigan lowered the required age to serve alcohol. New Jersey raised the limit on the number of hours teens can work over the summer. In Minnesota, a new bill would allow 16 and 17-year-olds to work construction jobs. In Iowa, proposed law would let 14 and 15-year-olds work certain jobs in meat packing plants.
No, for real. Iowa Republicans want to allow kids between the ages of 14 to 17 to work in incredibly dangerous, often deadly workplaces. Places like construction sites where more than 5,000 workers died last year. As it's set up now, there would be virtually no restrictions. The job would just have to be part of an education program, something that the company could invent itself. So why would lawmakers put kids who are just finishing middle school into such dangerous situations? That's Brad Epperly, a lobbyist who works for big corporate clients like the Iowa Grocery Industry Association. He's outright admitting to us that the Iowa Restaurant Association was the driving force behind this bill. They're an affiliate of the National Restaurant Association, a trade group that represents some of the biggest names in fast food, like Burger King and Taco Bell. They also lobby for big corporations like PepsiCo and Cisco. And from one look at their newsletter from this time last year, You can tell they've been hard at work spreading the gospel about the benefits of young labor. The hands-on internship at the slaughterhouse is their big priority this year, but we can't give them all the credit. This child labor law rollback originated at a meeting of the Iowa Workforce Development Board, which is overseen by Governor Kim Reynolds. Most of its members are corporate CEOs and lobbyists, and they meet up several times a year to come up with new policies. This bill was a product of a meeting in November. The WDB is chaired by Jay Iverson, executive officer of the Association of Iowa Builders, hence the emphasis on kids using bandsaws on work sites. Lobbyists from the Iowa Association of Business and Industry are well represented on the board, which gives member corporations like John Deere and Google seats at the table. And of course, no race to the bottom would be complete without the Koch-funded Americans for Prosperity and Opportunity Solutions Network, also lobbying on the bill to work. The next part of the bill was clearly written for the Iowa Restaurant Association, Hotel and Lodging Association, and National Bureau of Independent Businesses, the state leaders in low-wage jobs. It would allow 14-year-olds to work in giant freezing meat lockers and raise their mandatory clock-out time from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m., and then 11 p.m. in the summer. Places like McDonald's, which loves hiring kids, don't even need to worry about hiring adults who can fill those jobs, let alone paying them living wages. Consider these all big wins for BlackRock, Vanguard, Wellington, JP Morgan, Fidelity. Those Wall Street titans naturally own big stakes in the multinational food distribution powerhouses Cisco and Performance Food Service, two of the top donors to the Iowa Restaurant Association. Truly the voice of small business.
It really says something about conservatives that they are enacting into law the most extreme, nutty right-wing sentiments. That is, to take the developed world back to a 19th century Dickensian dystopia. Understandably, Antoine Lemont, if I'm not butchering his name, is calling on people in the UK to help support the French in their protests. But I would encourage everybody in the UK and in France to make also common cause with us in the US, because what is going on is an assault on all of us.